Okay, I'm Black Bite News, and first let me preface what I'm going to read to you with statements I have made are opinion or analysis, not factual claims about illegal activity by Pacific individuals. I decided to work on and share this piece because of the headlines that read the United States has publicly reaffirmed its recognition of Somalia's territorial integrity, which made me wonder, why does Donald Trump need to reaffirm his recognition of Somalia? And that opened up a can of worms. And what's that got to do with the UK? I thought, well, the UK has historical ties with Somaliland. It was a British protectorate before independence and unification with Somalia in 1960. Any shift in recognition patterns, for example, if the US or other countries were to suddenly recognise Somaliland, could put pressure on the UK to clarify its own stance. The UK usually follows international norms, but it also has strategic interests in stability in the Horn of Africa, so it might be called on to weigh sovereignty versus regional stability. And that could shape diplomatic posture or aid decisions. The UK isn't directly involved in the recognition debate, but it has historical ties, trade interests, security stakes, and a role in international law. That means diplomatically, the UK watches closely. Security-wise, it's invested in regional stability. Economically, trade and investment could be influenced, and normatively, it is affected by the precedent set by US, Israel, and others. So while a statement about Somaliland might feel distant, it is part of a chain of global dynamics that can touch the UK in subtle but real ways. Now imagine a place where life hums along in quiet order. Children go to school, shops open, markets bustle, people vote in elections, security is maintained, the streets are peaceful, the hospitals work, and communities feel a sense of pride and dignity. And yet, if you ask the world outside, it might as well not exist. This is Somaliland, a land many people may not have heard of, overshadowed by Somalia. The country is separated the country it separated from more than 30 years ago, when Somalia's central government collapsed in 1991. Somaliland quietly reclaimed its independence. No explosive declarations, no large-scale wars, just determined, orderly building of a society that could govern itself. And yet, despite decades of peace, functioning institutions, and democratic elections, the world, the international community, the United Nations, the United States, and even Israel continues to treat it as part of Somalia. It's legally invisible, a state in practice but not in law. They call this de facto independence versus legal non-existence. On the ground, people live full lives, they vote, they trade, they protect their borders, they govern, but the outside world does not formally acknowledge that existence. The passports they carry may not be widely recognised, their ports may be overlooked, their trade agreements constrained. The law does not speak their name. Their autonomy exists in practice, but their legal and diplomatic recognition is suspended, dependent on the choices of others who control acknowledgement as a tool of power. Recognition itself is almost a magical act. In the modern world, a country's existence on the international stage often depends on other countries agreeing that it exists. This is not a moral law, but a pragmatic arrangement rooted in centuries of history, formalised in agreements like the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. The principle is simple. Fix borders, prevent endless conflict, and ensure stability. Recognition became a gatekeeping mechanism, a way to say you exist in the global system or you do not. Somaliland has lived its adult life under this rule. For 30 years, it has been a model of responsible governance, restraint, and patient diligence. And yet, the carrot of recognition has always been just out of reach. It was never formally promised, not legally, but in the way encouragement and repeated approval are sometimes offered, a sense of expectation grew. Do everything right, the international system implied through tone, policy, and quiet signals, and one day it may count. One day the world may see you as a country. Decades of patient rule have produced invisible ceilings. It's like the worker who shows up early every day, takes on extra tasks, helps colleagues, never complains, never asks for overtime, and yet is never promoted. The promotion seems to exist, glimpses are given, encouragement is offered, but it never materialises. If the worker complains, they may be labelled difficult. If they continue to comply, they are ignored. Over time, quiet frustration builds. It becomes a bottling up of effort, dignity and expectation, because the system does not punish through overt hostility, but through the illusion of fairness, through the carrot on the stick. This is insidious. The system appears polite and benign, that plastic smile of diplomacy and institutions, but underneath it contains control and slow erosion of hope. Be patient, be respectable, keep performing. And yet when patience stretches into decades, when compliance seems endless, the response becomes a silent accusation. So why are you still asking? The system is not neutral. It functions exactly as designed, ensuring obedience without granting legitimacy, keeping power in the hands of those who control recognition, reward and visibility. This is why public statements like those made recently by the United States reaffirming Somalia's territorial integrity are so painful for Somaliland. The US is not suggesting Somaliland could be a country. It is reinforcing the legal status of Somalia's borders. And while this may be calm, polite and neutral language in diplomatic terms for Somaliland, it is a firm closure of hope. It signals to the world, do not recognise Somaliland, do not validate its autonomy, do not open the door that has been quietly hinted at for decades. It is like telling someone who has spent a lifetime building a house with care, discipline and integrity that the world will only ever see it as part of their neighbour's land. The frustration is compounded because it's not new. It has been a long, quiet conditioning. Every act of responsibility, every measure of restraint has been encouraged, acknowledged even, yet never fully rewarded. And just like in other social contexts, the consequences are deeply personal and emotional. For black communities and other marginalised groups, a similar pattern can emerge. Comply and you may be ignored. Resist and you may be labelled aggressive. Succeed and your success is treated as provisional, contingent on others' approval. The lesson becomes internalised. No matter what you do, control often lies in someone else's hands. Hope is negotiable and dignity can be quietly withheld. And yet despite all of this, Somaliland continues. It continues because people are resilient, because generations have invested in peace, because hope, however deferred, can sustain collective effort. But the truth is raw. Long-term restraint without recognition is exhausting. It breeds quiet frustration, a sense of being bottled up, a world of unexpressed tension, because every path feels like a no-win. You are constrained if you act, constrained if you comply, and still people persevere because that is what dignity, responsibility and survival demand. This is the human story of Somaliland, but it is also the human story of systems everywhere that wield power through implication, that manage hope and frustration, that shape behaviour through the carrot on the stick and the polite smile. It is about the weight of decisions made centuries ago, frozen into law and practice, whose consequences ripple forward across generations in borders, in opportunity, in recognition, and in the quiet, often invisible erosion of hope. And so we watch, we listen, we bear witness to what it means to exist in a world where recognition itself can be conditional, where compliance is rewarded with invisibility, and where the promise of acknowledgement is slow burning. Sometimes almost cruel lesson in endurance. Somaliland is more than a political footnote, it's a mirror, a reminder that dignity and effort are not always enough to make the world see you, and that sometimes living responsibly is an act of quiet defiance against a system that measures success not by what you do, but by whether those in power choose to notice. And I thought I would share that with you because like you, like me, I just wondered why the headlines about Somalia. I'd never heard of Somaliland. Now I know what Somaliland is and where it is and what it's fighting for, and why it must feel frustrated when it's not being given permission after 30 years. to be a country. So that's it in a nutshell. You take care now. Have a good day. Bye-bye.